We are looking at text features this quarter, and specifically we're looking at things that help us understand what's going on in the text and can kind of analyze how we understand what we understand in a text. Today, we're going to look at the specific details as part of our objective to explain the purpose of authors' choices in topic sentences, specific details, and transitions. So we are looking at punctuation. Now, we just read the short story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. You did a class study with it this previous assignment. On this one, we're taking an excerpt out. We're looking at 2 paragraphs and asking ourselves the question, what is James Thurber doing with his punctuation that helps us understand, if we're paying close attention, how he's using them to transition from reality to Walter's daydreams in this story. So if we look at the paragraphs, these 2 paragraphs, we will notice some differences in the way that our sentences are structured and how he is using certain types of punctuation. So we're specifically looking at things like how many periods, commas, if we have any dialogue, and we're especially looking for an ellipses. If you know what an ellipses is, it's that dot, 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 those 3 dots that help you know that either something's been omitted in a quote, or maybe it's a trail off at the end of someone's phrase. So it indicates kind of finishing up a thought. It can also be, as in this case, if we notice, it's a good indicator that maybe we are moving from reality to his daydream. So we're going to start with this first paragraph right here. When he came out into the street again with the overshoes and a box under his arm, Walter Mitty began to wonder what the other thing was that his wife had told him to get. She had told him twice before they set out from their house for Waterbury. In a way, he hated these weekly trips to town. He was always getting something wrong. Kleenex, he thought. Squibs? Razor blades? No. Toothpaste? Toothbrush? Bicarbonate? Carborundum? Initiative? Referendum? He gave it up, but she would remember it. Where's the what's-its-name? She would ask. Don't tell me you forgot the what's-its-name. A newsboy went by shouting something about the Waterbury trial. So let's see what's going on with the punctuation here. First, we're going to pick a color to mark each of the ones that we find significant. Like, you don't probably need to worry about apostrophes. This first comma, the first punctuation mark is a comma, so I'm marking it with my yellow. It's my first color. And I'm seeing that in this sentence, we've got a phrase that's set off by 2 commas. We could take this phrase out of the sentence with the overshoes and a box under his arm, and it would still make sense. When he came out into the street again, Walter Mitty began to wonder what the other thing was his wife had told him to get. That makes complete sense. So maybe he's using those commas as a stylistic choice to let us know that he's adding information. He's lengthening out the pace of this sentence so that it's longer. We get more detail. And then I'm going to mark that period with green because that's my second punctuation mark. She had told him twice. So the twice is set off by 2 commas again. So mark those with my orange, yellow again. Again, adding detail as we can see. So interesting. We've already got a pattern. And then another period. Mark that in green. In a way, he hated these weekly trips to town. We've got a big dash here. It's almost performing the same function as a comma. We could put a comma there, but stylistically, it's slightly different. It makes us feel like we're getting more of his thoughts. Maybe they're more tightly related to each other than just a plain old comma. Then we've got another period, so we'll mark that with green. Here we've got him thinking. Kleenex, comma, he thought. So we see that we have some commas here. The he thought tells us what he's doing in the sentence. These other commas kind of list the things that he's thinking about. I'm going to mark this question mark with green because it's doing the same function as a period. So I'm going to just highlight it the same way. No is a short little interjection, and it's got a period. We're going to leave that there as well. Then we've got more things that he's listing and thinking about: toothpaste, toothbrush, bicarbonate, carborundum, initiative, referendum. And so we're going to label those commas as well. Shows us what he's thinking. We've got another question mark. Mark it with green. Mark that period with green. This period with green. Now we've got some quotation marks. We're going to mark those as well. So that's first step. We're just marking our different punctuation marks. I'm going to highlight these hyphens as well. So this first part is going to take a little bit of time, just marking things, and that's okay. Because then what we'll be able to do is look at the pattern of the colors we've highlighted and start making some general observations about what's going on in each paragraph. So what I want you to do now is finish working your way through marking the rest of this second paragraph. I am going to stop recording as I do that really quick. So you're welcome to pause it right now and finish along with me, or you can finish watching this video and then move ahead at your own pace, whatever you'd prefer to do. I will come back in a second and share my next steps after I finish highlighting. Now remember that you are doing a different text than I'm doing. I'm just using 2 other paragraphs as an example, but you can do the same thing that I'm doing. So I'm done marking all of my second paragraph. So now we're going to look at what patterns we notice, and then I'll show you how to create a chart to kind of break it out into what your observations are. Now I'm going to do is create a little chart here at the very bottom, and it will probably make more sense for me to go on to the next page. Insert, oops, there we go. Insert a 4-column table. And I think I forgot to make this single space because I had it on double space. There we go. So the first column is punctuation patterns. So the punctuation pattern that we notice, we're going to write down what the punctuation is, what paragraph it's in this first column. Then the second column is example or examples, if you want to do more than one. The third column is the purpose. So this is like the grammatical reason for using that punctuation mark where it is, right? Like a period, it ends the sentence. Now, because that one's so common, we're probably going to ignore our periods as a punctuation pattern. We just want to look at them maybe to see the length of them per paragraph so we can see if the pacing is different. And then the final column is where we're going to analyze the effect of that punctuation mark. So in the first paragraph, so paragraph 1, for example, I have this comma pattern. We have 2 commas in one sentence. So paragraph 1, 2 commas in one sentence. And then I'm going to use an example. You don't have to use a big example necessarily. So I'm just going to copy that, paste, and then I'm going to get rid of the highlights in this one. Whoops. Except for I didn't. Oh, dang it. Let's try that again. Get rid of the highlights in that one. So that's our example. Again, comma with the shoebox. Oh, the overshoes in a box under his arm, comma. And then if you wanted to put the second one twice, you could put it in here, but you don't have to, right? So like if you're doing this in the other one, you don't have to give more than one example. The purpose of this, grammatically speaking, is to set off additional detail or unnecessary detail from the rest of the sentence, right? Because like we talked about, you could take that information in between those two commas out and the sentence would still make sense. But the effect of this is, like, why is he doing this in his first paragraph? Well, the first paragraph is where he's in reality. And what James Thurber seems to be doing is he's giving us kind of these mundane details. He's lengthening out the sentences by adding extra things to them so that they take a little bit longer to finish reading. So the effect is to slow down the story pace, add more detail to the sentence, right? So it's not overly complicated. Now, let's compare that to how commas are being used in this second paragraph. Let's see what we have. The first time we see a comma is actually several sentences in, and it is in the middle of some dialogue. "You are a crack shot with any sort of firearms, I believe," said the district attorney insinuatingly. So it sets off these little short phrases. They are asides, but they are adding brief detail instead of expanding the length of the sentence necessarily. So if we look at this first one, we've got these two, but they are not setting off, like, even though it's the same two in the same sentence, they're not forming the same exclusion. If we took out "I believe," said the district attorney, we would not understand this sentence. So they're performing a different function. So paragraph 2, we have commas setting off short phrases. And then we can give our example. Which is actually having 2 in there. Again, take off the highlights. What is it doing in here? Commas create a break for an aside or for an additional adjective. In this case, well, I guess this is not an adjective, it's an adverb. Tells us how he said the phrase that he did, and this I believe. The effect in here is to help intensify what's going on. And so it's helping intensify what's happening in the daydream, which picks up the pace. So it feels like it's moving faster than his real life is moving. There you have it. That's what we're going to do. You will go through in your example. I want you to look at commas, the semicolons, quotation marks, and the ellipses. Now, I will do an example of the ellipses in here if you've never come across those before. So paragraph 2, ellipses at the beginning and end. So the ellipses are these 3 dots, dot, dot, dot. And you'll notice here we are at the end of this first paragraph. That is reality. We know it's reality. And then the next paragraph starts with a dot, dot, dot. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. I'm going to copy that. And then take off the highlights. And it also ends with an ellipses. "You miserable cur," ellipses at the end. Now, what is that doing? Oh, maybe it will. Why? I don't know why it's doing that. Undo. Let me try that again. Copy and paste. There we go. That worked better. So the purpose of an ellipses is to show omitted information or to create a pause. In this case, it's being used stylistically to transition. So it indicates a transition between reality and the daydream. So that's a good hint to us in the story as we're reading, that he is moving from what is actually happening in real life to what's happening inside of Walter Mitty's head. And so that's a good indicator and kind of a hint as we're reading. If we're feeling confused, it's like, oh, I know why I don't have any context for this. It's because it's just a daydream that Walter Mitty is having in his head. So I would like you to do that exact same thing. If you're not quite sure about the purpose of different punctuation marks, you definitely can look them up. It's pretty straightforward to find grammar rules, like how commas are being used. But I think that you probably won't need to look it up. You can figure it out by asking yourself, what is it doing in the sentence? How is it working? And then ask yourself the stylistic impact of that, right? Like this, setting off additional detail. What is the stylistic impact? It's slowing the story down and it's making it less action-packed. And then in the next paragraph, the commas might be helping intensify it. So even though they might be used in multiple ways, you should be able to identify what the effect is. If you have questions, please send me an email. Let me know what your questions are. I am happy to help however you need help.